Hey, happy Monday. This is 15 Minutes of Fame with Sailing Anarchy. I'm Scott Tempesta. And on a post, I'm very hungover, by the way, post 4th of July. Um, our guest today is Phil Sharp. And if you don't know who Phil is, hi, Phil, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. A privilege to be here.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I doubt you'll be saying that at the end of this, but
We'll
that's
see.
okay. I appreciate the sentiment. Phil has become, for you people who don't know, like I said earlier, one of the very best shorthanded sailors, really anywhere in the world. And his focus, I would say, of late has been more single-handed than anything else. And the first thing I have to ask Phil is why? Like, why this particular brand of torture? We can all agree sailing is torture in various degrees. I try to limit the pain, I guess because I'm just not that good and I just want to I don't want to put myself in really tough situations. You, on the other hand, mister, you seek out tough positions. Like you race on boats that are pretty demanding, would be demanding for a crew. Yeah, it's just you or sometimes your co-skipper. And then not only that, but you choose races and venues that are in and of themselves often torture. So you're it's safe to say you're a glutton for torture. Can I say that?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a masochist, I suppose, in the way that I like throwing myself into situations which are challenging, which are difficult, because I know that's going to be the things that really reward me. I know that just going racing around the bay is something I'm going to get over pretty quickly. It's not going to give me the same incredible deep sense of satisfaction of getting out there and spending 24 hours a day going as hard as possible in a solo ocean race. And yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to just enjoy every minute of it. There's some really difficult moments, and it tests you psychologically, and you have to really keep reminding yourself about the big picture as well, about why you're doing this. But I think just the level of satisfaction I get from solo sailing is more significant than any other discipline. And yeah, particularly the tough events. Like a few years ago, I decided to race the Transat, thinking that it will be a fun race. It was effectively it felt like a trip to hell and back at the time. But I know that since doing that, it's made me a better person. It's made me possible to push myself further and for longer, because it teaches you about yourself, and it teaches you about where your limits are, and knowing that you've got a lot more to give, effectively.
You know, that's interesting because this really is about limit pushing. I mean, all sailboat racing is to varying degrees, but it's just you. And of course, you've got to do everything. And how do you, I mean, is there a point where you go, I can't do this anymore? I can't handle this? Like, we don't, sometimes you sort of mentioned, we find our limits, right, in life. And you maybe don't know what they are until you're put in a situation like you put yourself in, right? And all the solo sailors, shorthand sailors, you're in intense weather. You've got, really serious navigational issues, concerns. You've got the boat, you've got your competitors. I mean, it's everywhere you go and look on the boat, every waking minute. I'm assuming there are very few sleeping minutes, but all the waking minutes, it's just all dedicated to all of these elements and components all the time. Has it become overwhelming?
Yeah, I mean, you've always got too much to do on a boat, solo sailing. So, and it is a bit frustrating because you can't really do anything properly. You can't spend 2 hours at the nav station convincing yourself that route A is better than route B. So it's all about a trade-off, and you have to kind of be quite self-disciplined and just saying, right, I'm going to spend 10 minutes now navigating. I'm going to spend and I'm going to relook at it in a couple of hours. But after, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tune the boat a little bit and get the boat back up to speed, and then I'm going to have a little power nap, and then I'm going to eat. And finding the time to do all that is quite hard when you're on a predefined course, and you've got weather which is quite changeable. You've got sail changes to make, so it's not a case of just having a consistent routine. You've got to be really adaptable. and that can be seriously fatiguing. And there are moments where you get to a point where you know, you kind of want to crack really, and particularly when you have gear failure. For example, I had my mainsail shredded into two pieces when I was 2/3 of the way across the Atlantic in the Transat, and I still had 1,000 miles to go, and it was directly upwind, and at that moment you're just thinking, you know, what the hell am I going to do? And you know, you just want to get out of it. You just want to go home. But you know, in those situations where you really just get knocked down very, very low, you have to try and regroup yourself, and you have to get over, almost release your frustration, and learn to deal with the situation as quickly as possible. I think it's very difficult to hide frustration. I think you have to release your frustration or tension, but it's about getting back on a positive note very quickly, and always having your eye on that long-term goal. And I think, you know, the way you're going to get there is always going to change depending on what weather you have or what problems you have. You do get these setbacks, but you have to, you know, try and keep your eye on the long-term objective, and you have to keep adapting the way of getting there. And if you do so, then it gives you something to really keep focus on, something meaningful, and it keeps that keeps you positive, and it keeps you on that front foot, and keeps you fighting forward.
Let me ask you a question about that. So you said it's really important when you get in tough situations to release your frustrations, right? How do you do that? Do you go out and scream at the sky? I mean, is it something that you internalize and you work on mentally, almost like kind of Zen, you know, sort of center yourself? I mean, what do you do there? How do you do it?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to you know, you've got to try and avoid shouting at yourself, and just because you realise quite quickly that there's no point in doing that. It doesn't really get you anywhere. But yeah, you've got to take a bit of time to. I mean, what I quite like doing is just taking deep breaths, taking a few minutes to just completely take my mind off the situation, and then just look at the big picture, the reason of why I'm doing this in the first place. The reason I'm doing this is probably to initially go out there and enjoy myself and have a good time. You know, this is why this is the big idea we have when we all go sailing, and you know, you've got to realise you're very lucky to be there at the end of the day, and you know, something you can't forget, and then you've got to try and claw back that positivity, and yeah, I think the quicker you can get over that frustration without, you know, destroying too much of your boat, the better, and then you can. And then, yeah, I think really just try to distract yourself as well. Just doing something like focusing on purely boat speeds. Like, right, let's get this boat moving again. Keep yourself distracted. Not let your thoughts really stray too far and stray into any more negative emotions. And that I find really helpful for getting back on a positive footing.
Well, you seem like a really positive, optimistic guy. I mean, you have a perpetual smile on your face most all the time, and you carry that onto the boat. You try to maintain a sense of positivity, because a whiny bitch like me, I'd get on the boat and, you know, 2 minutes into the race, like somebody would go like, oh my God, I'm terrible. I can't do this. But you know, so I think a lot of this, and I don't know if you find this, but it seems like the single-handers, your group of shorthanded sailors, there's a real PMA, right? Positive mental attitude that has to go into this. It's determined, it's focused. You guys don't seem to lose much focus at all. There's, like you said, there's a goal here, and we're going to do everything we can to achieve it. But it's got to take a mindset that will keep you there in that positivity, as opposed to the things that are out there waiting to knock you down mentally. You seem to like rise above some of that stuff.
Well, it's you know, it's much easier said than done, but it's sure very important not to be knocked down by something that goes wrong. I think you got to realize that it's a marathon event, and that every solo sailor out there will make mistakes, make errors, and it's all about making the least number of errors, right? There's no such thing as a perfect race. And as I said before, a solo sailor has way too much to do. There's so much going on that you can't do anything 100%. So it's better to be consistent and be sailing at 90-95% rather than push too hard, make a mistake, and lose a huge amount of distance in that one big mistake. So yeah, it's endurance sailing for sure. And yeah, you've definitely got to have some mental stability, and I think the sleep is very important to that. The effect of sleeping just 2 hours a night can be really quite profound, and that can really help exaggerate negative emotions as well and negative thoughts. But I mean, in the last race, for example, I said to myself before the start, in this race, I'm going to try and avoid swearing during the whole race. I'm not going to shout at myself. And, I didn't think this was going to be at all achievable, but I went out there saying, I've got to stay positive. That's the main thing. That's my number one goal in this race, is I'm going to try and stay mentally positive. And just the fact I did that, I was able to sort of mentally remind myself of that throughout the race. And that just really helps. That really helps. And you just got to keep reminding yourself that, you had an objective and you've got to try and stick to it, and you can do it. And it was hugely satisfying, because it enables you to sort of just get over things, get over little errors, and just move on.
So not swearing, that allowed you to do some of those things? I mean, is swearing just like a cop-out, like, fuck, I'm fucked again, fucking thing, right? Whereas so not doing that, what does that do for you mentally?
For sure, it helps you. It just helps you keep more positive. I think I realized that during the Transat, because so much went wrong pretty much the whole race.
Right.
The first night I cut the corner of a shipping zone. The second day, my spinnaker went in the water underneath the boat, and I lost my medium kite. It was just a race like that, and I realized quite quickly, there's just no point. You just got to get on and fix things, fix the problems you've got, and rectify the situation. And the quicker you do that, the quicker you're going to get to the finish, and the quicker you're going to overcome some of this nightmare. So I think it's definitely something my experience has taught me, and the mental approach is so much more important than the physical approach. I mean, I spend a lot of time, I do quite a lot of physical preparation, but at the end of the day, it doesn't count for a huge amount when you're out there on your own, and you've got to sail in the water, or your boat is broaching all over the place, and you can't control things.
Sleep. I'm glad you touched on that, because that was definitely one of my topics here I've written down. You mentioned 2 hours a night. Okay, I know sleep is when you get it, when you can get it. I assume you try to have a routine built around a little bit of sleep, but sometimes every time it doesn't work out. Do you sleep? Is there such a thing as sleep training? I mean, is there anything that you do on land to prepare yourself for the sleep deprivation and the long periods of no sleep? Anything you do on land?
I'm no expert, but I think training definitely helps. Trying to get into a bit of a routine where you're having 15-20 minute naps beforehand, and I think age helps with that, because you get to a stage where you're just you're constantly trying to find some time to get an afternoon nap in, because you just get you lose that edge, and you realize that it's much more beneficial to have a little bit of sleep in the day rather than just relying on your sleep at night. And so yeah, I think sleeping around a clock a little bit can definitely help you reduce your overall sleep time. I had a little bit of training recently. It was quite interesting because it teaches you about your natural sleep cycles, and the way that you've got to really be in tune and ready to go to sleep when you have a natural sleep cycle arriving. So that typically is between 1.5 and 2 hours. And you can have a short-term sleep cycle, which will be roughly 15 to 20 minutes. And so this is what our solo sailors take advantage on. And if you sleep for more than 10, 15 minutes in a figure eight race, then you just lose. It's incredible how much time you lose. The way you have to just keep trimming the boat to stay competitive is unbelievable. is super important, and we're typically sleeping between in these short courses around Europe or around the coast of France. Typically, you're having between 10 and 20 minutes power nap at a time. But if you do several batches of those, then the second or the third cycle you try and take 2 or 3 consecutively. The second or third, the idea is that you enter into a deeper sleep cycle than your first cycle, which is a very lightweight, shallow sleep, and that enables you to really help recovery in the long term.
Are there techniques that you use to make yourself fall asleep, or it just happens? You're so exhausted, it just happens.
I'm not amazing at falling asleep quickly, but I think it's quite good to free your mind of everything and really to take your mind. To try and almost focus on nothing. To try and think about nothing. To try and empty your mind completely, or think of a good moment. Sometimes I picture myself sitting on a beach with a pina colada next to my beautiful wife, and just even thinking of a nice moment, a relaxing time can sometimes help you drift off quicker. But I think it's different. I think it's different for everyone. I think you've got to find what works well for you, I think it's not something you should just do when you're tired. I think you have to try and have a bit of a routine around it throughout the day.
Let's talk about the Figaro. Here's a class you've jumped into with both feet. Tell us about the boat. What is it like? I mean, it looks complex to some degree. It looks edgy. It looks fast. What's your perspective?
It's fast, but it's not that fast. But it's a fun boat to sail. You get quite a good sensation of speed when you're sailing it because it's quite low to the water. It's very light on the helm, so it feels quite like a big dinghy. And when you step from a Class 40 to a Figaro, it definitely feels like a dinghy. And it's a very sensitive boat to sail. So it's very important to tune it right, particularly the autopilot settings, in order that you can stay in the groove. So it's not an easy boat to just trim on, put the pilot on, and go fast. You've really got to work the boat hard to keep it moving to its optimum. I think a lot of people think the boat is pretty impressive because of the foils. I think the foils definitely help, but how much they help is questionable. It's not a foiling boat. It's a foil assisted boat. But when you're going fast, I mean, they are impressive. I was on the last leg of the solo major cock. At one moment during the leg, I actually thought I was flying. I mean, the boat was out of the water, and it was some way out of the water as well, because I sort of looked off the boat and I just thought, okay, well, I'm actually flying, and that definitely helps with the whole control, because when you're up there on the foils, you can really play with the boat, and you've got almost speed to your advantage, so you can, the apparent wind is pretty constant, and then you can effectively go where you want to. You can luff up hard, or you can bear away down a wave. So it's a really impressive way of sailing. But the foil, the foils only come into their own when you're going more than 12, 13 knots. When you're fully planing, then you can really start to feel them.
How much do you hand steer?
A lot less probably than I used to. I would say less than half these days. Probably more like 30%. And the hand steering is definitely useful when you're going upwind, downwind. I think, particularly in heavy airs, you can definitely be faster. Reaching, we tend to use the pilot a lot. Do a lot of trimming when you're reaching. And when you're solo sailing, if your pilot is nearly as good as you or nearly as fast, it can be better in the long run. You can be faster in the long run to spend a bit of time sleeping and focusing on strategy and tactics. So that it's basically your best friend on the boat, your pilot. it is incredibly good. And you've got quite a lot of settings as well, so you can really focus on trying to understand the pilot and tell it how to follow the wind, or and how to react to the waves as well. We don't have very expensive advanced autopilot systems on the Figaro 3, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely quite impressive, and it helps you sleep.
I bet it does. And they're awfully reliable these days, and they're very accurate. I mean, it's really incredible from somebody like me and most sailors on the outside looking in. It's hard to imagine, we sometimes think of our only relation to an autopilot is the old school ones, that they weren't all that great. And it's obvious.
Yeah, the vanes.
Yes, these systems that you guys have, I mean, these are demanding boats that, you can't afford to have it go off one way or the other in terms of direction, course, etc. But these things they're that good, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, an autopilot never really reacts the way you want it to, so you have to trim the boat a little bit differently. If you're in heavy airs downwind and you put the pilot on, the chance of you broaching is a lot higher, and yeah, sometimes it's pretty much impossible to use the pilot. So you just have to helm, and you have to sit at the helm for several hours and hope the conditions improve. But it's quite impressive. If you, even now in windy conditions, the pilots can be really good. You can get gust modes, you can get surf modes. The pilot really bears away on the waves. We don't have that on our systems, but the pilots on the Amocas and Class 40s will have those modes, and yeah, I mean, they can often be faster than you in when it's dark or in reaching conditions. The pilot can go faster than a person. So
do you feel
you have
like
to use them wisely.
You've learned a fair bit from just the one leg that you did do? You had a decent finish. You weren't that far out. I mean, listen, these things are all so competitive. The boats finished so close, and the amount you were actually behind the leader, it was like maybe 49 minutes or something. It's like, it's really not that much, but yet it must seem like a lifetime, on the boat. But if you learn, I mean, you really honestly feel like, okay, if I could sail that leg all over again, knowing what I know about the boat, because one of the things you talked about, Phil, was like you said, I could be wrong here, I probably am, but you said something like you broached like 20 times in a row, and you were having a hard time figuring out the boat. So you're putting a lot of effort into like, okay, I got to get this thing trimmed right, and maybe losing some focus on navigation, some tactics, whatever. What was that like? Like, you're goddamn. Oh, so you weren't swearing, but if I was swearing.
Oh yeah, it was a difficult end because I spent 90% of the race in the top 10, just within a couple of miles of the lead, and I mean, I rounded pretty much most of the marks of the race course right alongside Armel Leclerc. I mean, at one point we nearly crashed into each other. It was the middle of the night, and we were rounding an offshore mark. We put the spinnaker up, and we both went forward to take down the Jenica. And I just looked over, and I realised my boat was like surfing it, about to surf right into here. So I just got on the pilot in time and did -20 to try not to crash into the last winner of the Vendée Globe. He's obviously not going to be too chuffed. And then the following mark, I rounded 30, 40 miles later, the next mark, 2 meters behind him. So the margins are so close. It's really important actually to just take advantage of every tiny little strategic possible variability that you might have on the race course, and those meters can really add up into a lot. So yeah, typically you can see Figaro winners winning by a matter of minutes, sometimes seconds, and yeah, often you have the first 10 boats. I think we had the first 10 boats in this last race within about a mile and a half or 2 miles of each other by close to the end of the race. So yeah, I mean, the margins are just insane. But the racing is so exciting as a consequence of that. And yeah, I was generally really happy to be in the right up in the top group, because I haven't sailed Figaro since 2014. I did a race, and then the only full season I've done is in 2011. So it'd been a long time. And you know, I had my doubts. I didn't really know how I was going to perform, and what my consistency was going to be during the race. Whether I was going to have a good start and then sort of drift off slowly. So I was quite pleased. But yeah, the last leg was difficult because we had a lot of wind, and I had some sort of problem with the rudders. But for some reason, the boat just was broaching very, very heavily. And there was you know, I've sailed asymmetric boats a lot, but with this Figaro, there was no sign of the broach coming. The rudders basically just lost all kind of traction. And there was a couple of other sailors who had the same problem. It's not an easy boat, the Figaro 3 anyway, to control downwind. It has a tendency to do that a lot. But it's not something you want to do frequently because then spinnakers become expensive when you're fishing those out of the water.
For sure. And so going forward, feel like you're in a better place now than when you started in terms of the boat, in terms of what you've learned about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so awesome being racing so close to people like that. You can see exactly when you win, exactly when you lose, exactly where your weaknesses are, and that's the type of racing I love, where it's sort of staring you in the face where you need to improve by the end of the race, and that really enables you to move forward. So yeah, that's what we're doing, and that's why you have to train on the Figaro. So all the boats that do these races spend 2-3 days a week out there on the water between the races, and yeah, putting the speed testing in and being consistent by the time you get to the race course.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I've got a few things to do to fix this rudder problem, to make some adjustments on the sails. I had a couple of weeks out after the last race, but I'm just about to get back into some serious training. Next event is I'm doing a solo Concano, and that's about equivalent to a leg of the Figaro. And then the actual solitaire is a few weeks later. Starts where we've got to be in the race village end of August, and then that kicks off the last weekend of August and carries on throughout most of September.
That's impressive. I opened this up to some reader questions, so let's jump in a couple of these, shall we? All right, let's see. Jim Bowie, does the Figaro 3 jump on a plane easily?
It does, actually. Yeah, it's surprisingly easy to get the Figaro 3 planing. I think it's got a very flat hull shape, and yeah, you need to tune the foils well. You need to get it right in the groove. And if you can get planing before the others, you can really take an advantage. And it opens up a lot more options, you see. So if you luff at 5 degrees and you manage to go a couple of knots faster, then you know, it opens up a huge amount more options. It means that rather than going VNG downwind, you can potentially go fast, go high, go and find a shift, and then yeah, find an advantage and find another strategy.
Interesting. He says, what percentage of time did you guesstimate in the last race that you were foiling?
Yeah, I think I was only fully foiling in the last leg. There wasn't a huge amount of wind, and I only had my boat speed consistently over 12, 13 knots, where I was really planing in the last 10% of the race.
Okay.
So I would say I was only really foiling properly in the last 10% of the race.
And as you said, it's not a pure foiling boat. Would you say foil assisted? Is that the way you put it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you know, saying that, the bow does lift right out of the water when you're going fast with the foils, and it depends how much rake you apply as well. So you can tune the rake on the foils whilst you're sailing. Not all the time, but you know, that's something that really makes a big difference to the amount the angle of attack of your foils and your ultimate behavior of the boat.
Well,
it's not always the fastest. It's not always the fastest to use the maximum rake because it gives you more drag. So it's a real compromise, the rake you use, because you need the rake to get up to speed. You need to minimize the rake to get up to speed, and then you need more rake when you're at speed to try and lift the boat out of the water, and then you lose your drag, and then that can become more beneficial.
You talk about an added element to sailing, right? It's one thing to foil, it's another thing, to get up, but it's a whole nother thing to adjust the angle on these things, right? The rake, as you call it. I mean, that's just, it's such a foreign concept to those of us who've never done it on, certainly on a big boat. I mean, that is a big boat. That's a whole nother thing. As if you don't have enough things to do, then that's just another thing you have to, and it has to be right. Because a little off is, compared to the guys who are on, ends up being a lot off, right?
It's a whole new dimension, and it's quite new for everyone. No one knows exactly which settings work best. So it's a fun class to get into because it's uncharted waters to a certain extent. There's quite a lot to play with the foils, with this new variable. Instead of we don't have any more water ballast, so that makes things a little bit easier. So rather than messing around with having one tank full or half full or two tanks full, you can just focus on the foils. So the boat's lighter, and the foils create the righting moment instead of the ballast. So that simplifies it a little bit, and yeah, it's the way everything's going to go. So it's a good concept to master and learn how to take advantage of.
Fascinating, really, it really is. Miffy wants to know: are you still targeting the Vendée Globe for 2024?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. The next big step for me is definitely the IMOCA class, and having done 3 years in Class 40 and winning a couple of championships, the next obvious step is to go to the IMOCA class and move towards the next Vendée Globe and try and compete in as much of the IMOCA circuit as possible, including the ocean race. I would love to do the ocean race next year with a team. So I'm looking into options for that as well. But
are you talking to teams? Are you talking to teams now? Some teams about that, Phil?
Yeah, I'm talking to a couple of teams. Yeah. I haven't secured a place yet, but it's a race I love to do. Particularly as like a navigator, because I love offshore tactics, and that's something I've got quite a bit of experience in now. And the longer routing scenarios is definitely something that gives me a big kick. So we'll see. But it's a fantastic class. It's now you've got two big premier events, round the world race events. So there's a huge amount of value in the class. It's becoming an easier sell, but there's still big numbers and big budgets, and it's difficult to get into the class.
Is that what happened this time? I mean, you were trying to do a campaign for this go around, right? What happened to that?
We were, and we ran out of time really for this Vendée Globe. We had an interesting option open up, but it didn't work out in the time frame. We're looking towards for sure the next Vendée Globe, but you have to remember that the IMOCA class is full of amazing events, and it's not all about the Vendée Globe, and the ocean race is probably the peak of that event in terms of value, and it's an incredibly fun race to do as well. So the fact that the IMOCA class now has those two world events is I think phenomenal, and I think the class has everything going for it.
I do too. I mean, on the outside looking in, wow. I mean, the boats are incredible. The teams, the efforts, the sailors. I mean, it looks like it's Formula One-esque in terms of how well it appears to be organized. How incredibly enticing and sexy the boats are, and wild at the same time. It really does look like the thing. And I bet for you, if you could get on the ocean race this time, just not only will all the knowledge, all the contacts, and then when you get ready to do it, 2024, you might be in much better position if you could do this right first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ocean race is an awesome opportunity to sail with a team and push the boat hard to really find out about what makes the IMOCA and the foils really tick, and to exploit the maximum potential from these boats, because they for sure have not anywhere by any means reached their maximum potential. So I think it's quite a steep innovation curve at the moment, and these boats are going to get very fast, and it's going to be really exciting. And I think who knows what can happen in this Vendée Globe, but even the subsequent one, when people have got a lot more time to really optimize the boats, it's going to be it's going to be fascinating, and it's going to be at the pioneering end of offshore sailing, maybe even sailing. Put it to
So
that.
when you put your 2024 campaign together, save a little space for a Sailing Anarchy sticker right on the back, so when I see the thing like planning from you're leaving the fleet, zoom in, I'll see this little Sailing Anarchy sticker right on the back.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we'll probably be doing a live blog when we're around the start like this. So
absolutely, we will.
I'll just put on my T-shirt instead. So
that's it. Yeah, you're good. Let's see. Sunseeker, how do you manage sleep deprivation? We covered that. Asp wants to know, how'd you get into the Class 40/Figaro sailing, and what recommendations/tips do you have for those who would like to get involved in that kind of racing? It's a long. You don't have to give a long answer.
Big questions. Big questions. Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting story. The Class 40 is a very interesting adventure story. It's a lot easier to sell than a Figaro campaign. The Figaro remains to be very French. You're racing around quite complicated courses, so the Class 40, we did a great project. We did a zero emissions project for the Class 40. So we decided to do our racing without burning any fossil fuels. So we use solar, we use hydro, and then we use fuels as well for backup power. We got some really cool traction from it. And actually, the Class 40, you don't need wild budgets. I mean, it's incredible the budget, how budget friendly the class is for the performance, the speed of the boats. When you compare against the Mocha, it's basically like a tenth of the cost.
What is
and it enables you to.
Phil, excuse me.
Well, I mean, if you want to do a new boat project with a Class 40, a new boat will set you back 600, but then a Mocha 60 is going to set you back 5.5 million.
Yeah.
And then maybe you're looking at between 200 and 300 K per annum running costs for a Class 40 project. So you really are about a tenth of the price of an Amoca campaign. And the fact is, it opens up all the races, all the premier Atlantic races for you to compete in. So you can go and compete in the Route de Rhum, the Transat Jacques Vabre, the Transat, and be in the race. So it's a really great class. It's a great stepping stone to ocean racing, and it is open to amateurs as well. And it enables you to take part in these great adventures, even if you don't want to do it to finish in the top 5.
That's really good to hear. Let's see. Last question he had. I've got a couple more to get through. What technical skills did you find to be useful? Because you're an engineer by schooling and training. What technical skills did you find to be useful, and which ones did you have to develop as you became more competitive?
I think having I've got quite a practical rather than theoretical. I suppose I've always been I've always liked building stuff. So I'm that sort of engineer, and I think I realized that there's always many solutions to a problem. So if something breaks on the boat, there's actually several ways of fixing it, and that gives you the confidence that you can find a problem to pretty much anything. And if you've got a lot of Dyneema lying around, and you've got Sikaflex, and it's amazing how much you can repair things on the boats with bare essentials like that. And even repairing a mainsail, maybe you have to cut out a bit and tie it together, but there's ways of doing it, and there's ways of overcoming major damage. Probably apart from when your keel falls off mid-Atlantic, but aside from the big things. I also done a lot of composites, so I know how to structurally repair a boat. That's very important if you have a collision in an ocean race, or if you just have stringers that pop off and you need to bond those back on. It can be really helpful having some laminating experience. Those. That and also being able to be good at splicing rigging is key. And then I've also just thought the electronics is very important as well. So you've actually got to know the electronics of your boat inside out, and that's probably a weak spot of most sailors, because it's all very well coming from a really good technical sailing background, but when you get on a boat and you've got to suddenly work out where your electronics fault is coming with, you've got 10 modules on a boat that's coming from one of these modules, you don't know where it is, and your pilot's not going to work until you solve the problem. It can be,
so you've probably,
very...
You had to use at various times, you've had to use all of these skills, haven't you, for like these sorts of situations, right? Because God, I don't know how many situations similar to this you've probably run into over the years. But
yeah.
Right?
And normally you have one problem, you have another that comes at the same time. So yeah, you're normally trying to get all the problems come at once. And then you've got to know how to. If you've got an engine on your boat, and your engine doesn't work, you don't have any power. If you don't have enough renewable energy, so you've got to work out how to strip an engine, and try doing that in a Force 8. It's and you've got to find the right spanner and Allen key and try not to be seasick down in the middle of the boat with a lovely pungent smell of diesel at the same time. It's not easy.
Boy, you're really selling me on this, Phil. I can't wait to sign up.
Apart from that,
Really
sailing is an incredible experience.
Here's a good one. Sail Bite wants to know, sail by date. Tough break with the home run on the solo. Has it been difficult for you to immerse yourself in the French sailing culture?
Yeah, good question. Well, I suppose I started with the French immersion at quite a young age. The first race I did was a mini transat, so I've always had one foot in the French offshore solo sailing camp, so to speak. But it can be quite tricky. The language barrier is very difficult. I still find it difficult. I've still never learned French properly. And all the race briefings are in French. They do a lot of the time have translators, which is very useful. And they are very accommodating towards international skippers as well. But in terms of the general lingo, I find there's two levels. I think there's classic French, and then there's the whole crazy French and the social French that goes above it. And the social French layer is when people are speaking really quickly around you in a group, and that can be often stuff that's really useful in terms of performance discussions, and it just goes straight over your heads if you're not born in France, effectively.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people disagree with me because I'm just rubbish at languages. People who've actually moved to France and learned French properly, unlike me. But yeah, it's something that it's something that takes years, and yeah, you have to. I think it's good to train against the French because they they're pretty good at what they do in offshore racing. We can't argue with that. And if we can compete against them, if I can train against them, it really helps me. It really helps me move forward and try to bring the best out of me because they're always constantly moving forward. So yeah, it's a difficult one.
I'll bet it is. This ties into that just a bit. With your background by Gurit, is that how you pronounce it? Gurit? Your sponsor?
Well, say that again.
Gurit, your sponsor? G-U-R-I-T?
No, we're not sponsored by. No, I'm not sponsored by Gurit. I used to work at Gurit. Actually, it's my first job. I worked at Gurit, but I'm not sponsored by them, unfortunately.
So, and I misread that. My apologies. So he says, with your background with Gurit, how has the composite side of racing boats changed in the last decade? Any surprises coming in that field in terms of development? In terms of materials, not really. No, we're all still using very conventional materials. In terms of the hull shapes, the hydrodynamics, there's been massive improvements. But I think the sailing industry really has to move forward big time in terms of the materials it uses. So there's very little eco-friendly solutions out there. We need to work towards finding recyclable solutions for composites, but also composites that are bio-derived as well. Now, you don't necessarily have to have them both. So, if you have a composite system that can be recycled, it doesn't necessarily have to be bio-derived because you get so much energy saving out of giving that material another life cycle. So if you can, I think the worst use of composites is in tooling, right? We make tooling to create sometimes one boat or several boats, and then we throw it away. But there's a huge amount of energy that goes into making composite materials. So for making 1 kilogram of carbon fiber, you release 33 kilograms of carbon dioxide into the air. Wow.
Okay, it's enormous. It's enormous, and And if you can recycle these if you can recycle the resin, extract the resin, and reuse the fiber, then and you can use that for multiple life cycles, then we're in a much better place. But this is a huge amount of work to do, and I think it's up to the classes to drive forward some obligatory uses of biofibers in the future rather than carbon fibers, and bioresins as well, resins that can be extracted so you can reuse the materials at the end of the boat's life cycle.
Makes sense, and I would dare say I think it's going to be mandatory at some point. Some of these things, I mean, it's clear you're going to have to start doing things a little differently.
Yeah, and I think we ocean races. I think we set an example. I think the races set an example as well. The competitive side of sailing gets a lot of media attention, and we're pushing the forefront of innovation. So we need to be the ones coming up with the ideas and showcasing them and demonstrating them. This is actually what our Oceans Lab project is doing at the moment in terms of energy. So we're trying to push forward the application use of fuel cell applications to replace diesels. So we're actually just developing a fuel cell which runs on hydrogen, green hydrogen power, to completely replace diesels, because it's a 50-year-old technology that we don't need in our boats anymore. And there are solutions that exist that can give us clean zero emissions power, and ones that are going to take us into the future and enable us to use renewable energy as well, which is something we can't do with diesel.
That's really something. And I know you guys do, as sponsor, you guys do a good job telling the story, telling the various elements where you guys are working in terms of, your own boat and what some future applications will be. It's actually almost a perfect marriage between you and Oceans Lab, right? I mean, in so many ways.
It's something I've always been passionate about, and I think I've always wanted to make some change. Ever since I did my first mini transat on purely solar power, it really made me ask the question of why on earth we need noisy, complicated diesel generators on board with lots of moving parts, when harnessing the maximum amount of renewables around us is a lot more reliable. So yeah, it's going to take time to make change, but it's the only winner is going to be renewables, and we need to find ways for the whole industry, for shipping as well, how we can actually find practical ways of using that renewable power to move ships across the ocean. And that's not going to be just from solar power alone. That's going to be use of green renewable fuels that we generate on land through big renewable parks, like big solar and wind parks, that we can use to power the ships of the future.
Well, that's awesome. And I want to thank you for your time. This has been really interesting. I mean, super enlightening, and I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
You're one of the good guys, and we're pulling for you, and we'll definitely stay in touch with you, Phil.
Yeah, take care.
All right, buddy. Thanks very much.
Look forward to it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Cheers, Scott. Take care. Bye.